Well, hi again, folks. I'm Greg Flynn, the Public Information Director here at the City of Pearl, and it is time to take you all under the dome over at the State Capitol in downtown Jackson. We are honored to have our distinguished gentleman from Rankin County here, Representative Gene Newman from over in the House of Representatives.
Happy to be here.
The man, Senator Dean Kirby, the pro tem of the Senate, the man that really, I don't want to say runs the Senate, but you do when they're out of town. when everybody's out of town, you're kind of like
the governor and lieutenant governor.
Yes.
But that's usually on weekends. I don't have to do a lot there.
Only on weekends. So if anything big needs to
Most
happen,
of the time.
let's let the senator know, and he can handle it on the weekends. Well, you guys are coming off, a couple of big deadlines where legislation is either still alive or has gone by the wayside for this year.
We're coming up on the deadline.
The dead deadline.
No, not the dead. The dead deadline.
All right, explain that.
It goes dead. I want you to understand.
All right,
dead is so bills are to be dead are of three statuses. They're dead. That means that they died in committee or they died on the floor, but they ain't dead.
Okay.
So we're coming up on the dead deadline, which is they've got to get out of the original house. Okay. So what that means is you introduce a bill and it moves forward through the originating House committees and gets onto the floor, and it makes it off the floor and heads over to the other house. It's still alive. If it does not make it to that point, it's considered dead. Now, it ain't dead until you get to sine die. And the reason it's not dead till you get to sine die is because at the end of the session, it's actually dead. Anytime before that, the language can be taken out and put into another bill if you can find another bill that's germane and kept alive.
And germane meaning that if you find a bill that has a code section,
That
it
matches.
may not have anything to do with that particular issue, but
Right.
if it's got that code section in the bill, then you can add it. And even then, you'd not have anything, and it gets to conference. And that's 3 from the House, 3 from the Senate, and they'll sometimes add things that you're not expecting. Maybe something that's died once or twice already. We actually, one year, I think this was late 90s, early 2000s, the Senate actually voted on what we call the chicken bill, which was the processors versus the growers bill, and what authority each had. We voted on that, I think it was either 23 or 26 times that year. Every time that code section, here comes the amendment on the floor. And it died, and then it came back at the end and died again in conference.
We have things called Lazarus bills over at the state legislature. They can come back with a little help. It just needs a little help. Well, let's talk about some of the bills that are currently still alive, making it through the process of their leaving from the House, going over to the Senate, or vice versa, clearing the Senate, heading over to the House. Gene, for you, what's a piece of legislation, or some of them that are important to you, that you're interested that are still alive?
Well, the main bill that I'm still focused on is the one that we passed early, House Bill 1125, which is the stops the transgender changes in the hospitals under the age 18. And that bill has gone over to the Senate and has made it out of Judge B out of the Senate, and is now on the calendar. So hopefully they'll take that up. But the good thing about it is they've got several weeks to take it up. They don't have to take it up before Thursday because it's already over there. But beyond that bill, we had a bill, and the number just went out of my head, that we dealt with in the House on water for the city of Jackson. And it wasn't, they say it's just the city of Jackson. It actually is not just the city of Jackson, because they're having the same issue in some places on the coast. But it would require that the billing, that rather than being based on anything else, it requires the billing to be based on metered delivered water. And so that's a big issue. I know it's a big issue in the Senate too. So I think that y'all have, doesn't Carter have a bill like that?
He does. We've already passed that, and we passed the Senate transgender bill as well.
So it's for that deadline, for that water bill, there was a proposal for the city of Jackson that rather than bill you on your usage. It would just be on the value of your home was one proposal.
Well, it was based on the area of your home was one proposal, and that was one Carter brought out of the committee that was amended to say based on the consumption or usage.
Right.
And there's all kind of problems with what Jackson wanted to do with that. First off, if you're going to be billed the X amount every month, why would you care if you left the water running in the yard overnight?
What's the impetus for conservation?
Yeah, for that, and plus, let's say you live by yourself in a home, and next door is the same size home, and they've got 5 to 8 kids, and you live by yourself. Why should you pay the same amount as those people next door? So there's all kind of problems with that. I don't know where Jackson got that idea, but it's not going to happen.
Well, one of the other
Yankee that they brought down here.
as you're talking about Jackson Water, one of the issues that came up, that was a hot topic this week was, they were allowed a 1% tax revenue, special tax that they're going to be able to collect.
But they've been collecting.
That they've been collecting, but the legislature now says, well, to renew it or keep it going, you need to spend it on your water infrastructure. And I think there was a little, misconception about what the legislature is intending for that.
Yeah, the problem is, and there was a lot of discussion. It was House Bill 1168. There was a lot of discussion about that bill. Of course, the people from Hinds County were saying that the rest of the state's trying to run their business, but this is the reality. That people don't understand. They've got $600 million coming to them from the federal government. Well, we know that, first off, they have the water plants themselves. In other words, you have the O.B. Curtis, everybody keeps concerned about that, but you also have like 6 or 7 wells in the city of Jackson that are having just as many problems as O.B. Curtis has. When the governor took over and fixed all that, he got them all running. And like last week, the one that feeds Forest Hill schools was down, and they was out of school, back to distance learning stuff. So you got those water plants are a big problem, and it's going to take a lot of money to fix that. Secondly, you've got the sewage system down there off Savannah Street that there's like a $220 million fine imposed on that place right now, which is one of the reasons Rankin County got out of it. So if they're smart, rather than trying to fix that, they'll do what Rankin County did and go build a new one, because they can build a new one a whole lot less than a $220 million fine that they
Well, not only the fine that they'll have to pay, but then you've got to pay for the improvements out there as well.
Right.
So you've got to permanently fix it.
But that's what I'm saying. Put a new one. Just you've spent a lot of time touring the new one at West Rankin. So and we managed to build that under budget down there.
Under $100 million.
Under $100 million. So, there's no reason that they can't do something similar over there. Just build a new one and shut the old one down and stop all that, because it's destroying the Pearl River. With all the sewage that they're putting down it. So they need to stop that. They need to fix that. And so they need to take part of that money and build a new sewage system and solve that issue. And then the third issue is all of the city streets have pipes under them, and I'm told that, like downtown, that some of the pipes that are underneath the city streets are actually wood, that they're that old, that they've not been replaced in that long. I can't imagine that, but that's what somebody told me. But I know that without a doubt that every place you go in the city of Jackson, you see water running out of the street. And that's a busted main, or and you look in people's yards, and where the meters go, there's water leaking. So there's a tremendous need. So if you're living on one of these streets where they don't have water, they kept saying that $15 million wasn't going to do anything, $15 million wasn't going to do anything. If you're living on one of those streets that don't have water, or you're living at Jackson State and you're not able to take a shower, you're not able to go to school there because they've got the water system shut down at Jackson State, $15 million would fix that one. $15 million would fix one of the streets that they're having no water on. So $15 million may not be a touch in a bucket compared to $600 million, but it'll solve some problems.
So I think from the argument that was made on the floor, again, it's that misconception that says, okay, they are getting $600 million from the federal government, and that's to fix the infrastructure. What the legislature, I think, from what you've explained, is trying to say is, no, we want to earmark that $15 million approximately that they'll be receiving from this tax revenue to make sure that it goes into the street level. You know, it's not going to, yes, if you were taking that $15 million and putting it into a new water treatment plant, no, it's not going to go very far. But what you guys are saying is we want to make sure that you're spending that money on the streets to fix pipes that eventually then lead to potholes if they break underneath, that the potholes then form. So yes, that $15 million, as you explained, it would go a long way in helping replace pipes within city streets.
Yeah, and it does no good to take money and go pave streets when the streets are just going to be tore up, fixing water leaks underneath them. You need to fix the leaks, fix the water leaks first, and then worry about the streets.
We actually had, I think it was last year, and I believe it was Fortification Street, where there was a leak, but they also were going to repave Fortification, and where it was bubbling up, they just paved right over it, which made absolutely no sense. And of course, you know what happened. It gave way immediately. So it makes no sense.
Yeah, instead of taking it and taking that $15 million, as was said, oh, we can pave a lot of streets, fix a lot of potholes. You know, it's putting lipstick on the pig, as they like to say.
Yeah,
so you're going to pave
fix
over
the water first.
You're going to pave over a pothole, but guess what? It's coming back in a week
Yeah.
because of the water that's still coming up underneath. So that makes a lot of sense. I'm glad you explained it out that way. One of the other big things that issues that has arisen since we last spoke is a prescription health plan. Is prescription drug prices.
It's the problem with the pharmacy benefit managers.
So right now, before the legislature is changing legislation to help out independent pharmacists and kind of take the big guys and kind of bring them down a few notches. Can you guys explain that?
You want to go first?
So what happens is you got something in there that's supposed to be between insurance companies and drug companies. Then they're supposed to negotiate prices down to save money for the insurance companies, or for if you're a big company like Ingalls Shipyard and you're self-insured, you know, it's supposed to save them money. So they're supposed to negotiate with the drug manufacturers and the drug sellers to equalize the prices so everybody knows what they're paying. The problem with it is the way they do it. When you have a drug company, when you have a pharmacy company that owns its own PBM, and it's trying to use that to do away with its competition, so that, you know, they're charging their customers less, but charging more, making it where you have to pay, for the independents have to pay more, or you know, and people don't realize Kroger is like an independent to some degree, even though they're a big pharmacy, they're not part of these groups. So you get into these independents, they're being targeted to be almost trying to be put out of business by cutting the prices, by forcing them to charge more than the other drug companies are.
Dean, I mean, because there's
good
legislation in both the houses, in both the chambers for this, and you know, there's one currently sitting.
Of course, the PBMs are saying, you know, we control the rates as to what they can sell for. We're keeping the drug prices down. Independent pharmacies are simply saying we could sell a lot cheaper than what the PBMs are making us sell it for. So it's a battle between the two, which one's telling the truth type deal. If nothing else in this bill, it's going to come out, it'll finally come out, why are we paying so much for prescription drugs? Who's making the money? Is it the manufacturer, is it the PBM, or is it the pharmacies? And I think it's a mixture myself. I don't think it's the pharmacies, because I think the independent pharmacies especially lose money a lot of times because they have to stay competitive with the others, and the PBMs are requiring them to sell at a certain price. So I think the independent pharmacies are losing money on a lot of scripts that they give. And you know what they do then? you'll go into the independent pharmacy and say, I need this certain thing, and they're going to say, oh, we're out of that. You're not going to be able to get it. You know why? Because they don't want to lose $100 or $50 or $75 on everyone that comes in there.
So while it sounds good on the surface, from whichever side you have to believe, because people can make numbers say whatever they want it to say, depending
Sure.
upon which side you're on. I guess the one red flag that comes up if it's introduced that you want to change the system is when we see that the state health plan is not included in this big cost savings thing where, state legislators, state employees, anybody that's part of the state plan would not be included in this legislation. I think that's what a lot of the public says, well, if it's good enough for us, why isn't it good enough for them?
Yeah, now I may be wrong, but I think there's an amendment coming that take all the self-insured plans out of it. Now, when I say self-insured, we're talking about the state, Ingalls, Toyota, they're self-insured. I think they're going to be taken out. So at that point, I can't imagine why something wouldn't pass. But again, I'm not sure the bill will even ever be brought up, even though it's on the calendar.
So a lot of times, Gene, one of the things that bills are meant to do is not necessarily pass, but get a conversation started.
That's correct.
And so this is something that's been introduced several times. It just seems like, the longer a bill keeps getting introduced year after year, the more conversation that it creates, and that eventually you come to an agreement on it. So it's not necessarily meant that it's going to pass in 2023, but man, it's really starting the conversation.
Well, and that's exactly correct. I mean, before I became a legislator, I've worked with a lot of different legislatures on the other side. Not as a lobbyist, but as an industry person. And we would introduce a bill knowing that we couldn't pass it this year, but knowing that we've got to educate the legislators and the staff about what we're trying to do, and so that they see the bill and when there's 3,000 bills that's introduced every year, a lot of them are introduced just for political purposes. In other words, there's a lot of people up there that introduce bills just simply for political purposes.
Hey, I did this. I tried.
Yeah, I tried. And they have no intentions of ever working on them or trying to do anything with them. But I'm gonna give you a perfect example. My litter bill that I've introduced for 3 years now. I'm trying to get. There's somewhere in there. There's a balance of where judges will actually enforce it, police officers will actually write tickets for it or put people in jail for it, and that we can find the right amount of fine or penalty that would stop people from littering. Littering is a horrible problem we've got in the state. Everywhere you go,
illegal dumping, the littering.
I mean, you just drive down this old Brandon Road and you see all kind of litter all the time. Just people because they know nobody's going to do anything to them. I mean, when you reach a point, it's like any crime. When they know that nobody's going to do anything to them, they just do what they want to do. So, that introducing that bill 2 or 3 years in a row and not getting anywhere with it is not necessarily about passing that bill. It's about trying to figure out where we can get to agreements with everybody on to get it passed, to get something done about it.
Several years ago on that particular bill, someone made the statement over on the House side, no one's going to enforce it and people aren't going to pay attention to it unless it's a significant fine. So their bill came out, it was $1,200. That'll make people not throw trash out. But it came over the Senate and the question was asked, $1,200, I'm not saying that's wrong, but what is a DUI? $600? So it's okay, it's better to drive drunk than throw out a gum wrapper. That bill died.
Well, then that shines a light on the DUI.
That's right.
That says that may be very, very low for a DUI.
They've raised it since then.
Yeah. So so again, these other bills are meant to show the absurdity, perhaps, or the need for fixing, outdated legislation.
But Gene is exactly correct. If you don't introduce some of that legislation, even knowing that it's going to die, or probably will, you've got to constantly be pushing it and saying, well, this is wrong
If
and
you
we need
believe
to
in it,
correct
yes.
it.
If
Yeah,
it's-
if you
if
believe
it's-
it.
Yeah, if it's something you believe in, you've got to introduce it, and you've got to go talk to the chairman. You've got to talk to the. I mean, it's just like that litter bill. You know, you got to talk to judges. You got to talk to sheriffs. You got to talk to police. I mean, I'm gonna tell you something. If a police officer believes that he's wasting his time writing a ticket or putting somebody in jail for something, he ain't doing it.
Yeah.
He can find something else to do rather than go out there and try to argue with somebody about throwing trash out of the car. Then, and he knows that the judge is not going to do anything with it because the way the law is written, the judge says it's not. I can't do anything to him, so just let him go.
Well, Jackson's not enforcing misdemeanors anyway.
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, one of the other topics that was introduced that really gained a lot of traction last year. Haven't heard too much about it this year, and it is pretty timely as everybody's in the tax filing season. Is the elimination of the state income tax. That was a very hot topic last year. Was that just to kind of get it out there and get the discussion going? And so are we going to see any movement on it this year or no?
The House is.
We're gonna pass something out of the House. I mean, to completely eliminate it. You know, and we recognize that the Senate's not necessarily on board with it, but if we don't keep working with them, if we don't keep pushing it, then
right.
it'll just fall off the radar. So
and we believe also with extra funds in the revenue or extra revenue right now that instead of eliminating it, we think we should just give it back to the people. In other words, why wait and then someday maybe have to come back and add it back again? Our deal is that we think if we have a surplus, that we should give it back to the people.
So
or
rather
percent
than,
of it. Yeah.
So rather than the long-term elimination of it, you're just like, okay, we got a bunch of extra money now.
Let's give it back.
Let's give it back to the people. But then you're going to keep paying state income tax next year unless we have
That's right.
a surplus still. So you're not really it's
If
changing.
we're giving, we're really not. All we're doing is a rebate back to the people. But when that revenue starts falling, and we feel like it is, we know that a recession, if not already here, is going to be here, and we know that first off, income tax is a third of our total revenue. If you do away with a third of it, and then we come off the sugar high of the money from the federal government, then what's going to happen? So we're going to leave it on the books. As long as we have a surplus, we're going to return a certain percent. When that surplus is not there, you don't get it back anymore.
So rather than, Gene, it sounds like from their perspective, rather than change policy, it's going to be bank account dependent about whether or not we
That's
have a
right.
state income tax year to year, which I think.
well,
That's right.
that's the reason it's two houses.
Well, it's
Yeah.
hard to give money out when you don't have it.
Yeah.
But
If you do a credit like the House wanted to do, to eliminate it, then that's exactly what you've done. You're giving away money you don't have in the future. That's the Senate position.
And I understand their position. I understand that I believe we are headed toward financial difficulties, and I don't. But according to what the economists tell us, if you can believe them, they're like kind of weatherman though. If you listen to them, they say, well, it's never dropped more than this much. So, even in 2008, it dropped this percentage amount. So, we still shouldn't fall below this level. So, yeah, and you know what? The only way we're going to know for sure is to get there and see. But we still want to try to push for the elimination of income tax. I think it's important for us in the long run. Now, whether or not we're able to get there this year or what we're able to do this year, we go somewhere in the middle. We're gonna find something to do.
So I mean, is there the possibility, and again, as I listened to the Senate say, okay, if we got it, we're giving it back to you, but then we're still going to have the state income tax. Yeah. On the other side, it's like we're just going to get rid of the state income tax and we'll see what happens. I mean, is there a step down phased approach to maybe reduce the state income tax as low and see where it?
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think one of the things that I've heard the chairman of Ways and Means in the House say that they're talking about doing a rebate. Well, let's take that money and cut that much of the income tax off, and so rather than 4%, it'd be down to 3.75, whatever it is. So you take 0.25% off, take that amount of money off, and start whacking on that income tax like that. And you know, that, like I say, somewhere in the middle, there's some kind of grounds for us to get together, and we'll see.
Yeah,
we got a lot of time left on money.
But let's not get state income tax confused with federal income
Yeah,
tax.
exactly.
State
No,
income
this is
tax,
just what goes to the
I
Department
think-
of Revenue.
Yeah, probably the average person would pay $200 state income tax, $200 or $300 a year. So where they write, and it's held out, and you don't really even know they're doing it. But that federal income tax is a whole different world.
Right.
They might pay $200 or $300 state, but they may pay $5,000 in federal. That's
Sure.
a whole different ballgame, and I wish we could control that, but we can't.
Well, you guys have another big deadline day coming up, February 9th, as that is
Thursday.
like the, well, it's sort of the alive then dead, and then we'll see if it comes back later in the session. But at least everything that is still currently alive has to move from either the House over to the Senate, and the Senate over to the House, and then we'll see where the chips fall, and we will talk about that on our next edition next week.
Let me tell you something funny that happened to me this weekend.
Okay.
My son, I have a son and a daughter, both that live in Ocean Springs. My son is on the main street, which is Washington Street, Washington Avenue in Ocean Springs, and that's where the Mardi Gras Day Parade, they go down it, for the Mardi Gras. And of course, he's like on the second floor, has a big balcony, and I'm out there with some friends, from this area actually. And we were on his balcony, and it was crowded, and it was noisy, and the floats were playing loud music and all this. And anyway, right before it started, with all this noise, Delbert Hoseman was walking down the street and waving at people and that kind of stuff. He's working, And so I yelled from up high, "Delbert!" He just keeps walking. "Delbert!" He keeps walking. I yell, "Engelbert!" He looks up.
Did you get a lot of beads?
Well, I had a few, but I gave them to kids. He got a little football, gave it to kids. So.
Mardi Gras time is a good time. You guys like king cake? Are you a king cake fan?
Used to be.
Used to be?
My grandchildren get that king cake now that I get each
You
year.
a fan of king cake?
Yeah, no, I'll eat it if it's in front of me, but I'm not going to go buy it.
Man.
But the everybody tells me one of the best king cakes you can buy is right here in Pearl at the donut factory.
Yeah, and you got to order ahead. We got several good places, but the Donut Factory is a big one right on Highway 80. I'm a big fan of the king cake with the cream cheese and the strawberry on it too.
Yeah, that I like.
Yeah, that's really something special.
Well, anytime you put strawberry on something, it's going to get good.
Well, and you put that cream cheese in. I'm a big fan of that.
Yeah.
A lot of people say no, that's not the traditional. You have to have just the cinnamon and all that other, which just kind of gets kind of dry sometimes. But enjoy. I mean, it's Mardi Gras month. I mean, so it'll be.
It's a big deal on the coast. Let me tell you. I mean, they have a holiday. The school. They
Oh,
get
yeah,
out
they
of
don't
school.
go- they don't
People
go to school on
some
Fat
don't go
Tuesday.
to work. So.
And then Ash Wednesday, it's a good time. Everybody can get involved, regardless of your religion or anything. Mardi Gras is just Mardi Gras, right? Well, gentlemen, we're going to let you get back to the Capitol. We look forward to
you.
talking to you guys again next week.
Thanks so much for having us.
All right, you guys can track bills anytime by going to the legislature website, legislature.ms.gov, and all the bills that we talked about, you can read up on them there, and you can track their progress, what's alive, what's dead, and what is soon to be dead, but not dead until signing ballot. Until next time, Under the Dome, I'm Greg Flynn. You all have a great day.